Hello everybody and welcome to my review of volume number 3 of Sakon Kaidou's light novel series Infinite Dendrogram. Now, this volume is actually comprised of 3 different stories. The first part that takes up about 60% of the book is, of course, the continuation of Rei's ongoing story. It focuses primarily on the aftermath of him taking out the Go's Maizei gang, sort of going back to town, getting his reward for it, trying to figure out what to do with the pretty ridiculous sized reward that he gets. And then it has him meeting up with Rook and Marie to find out what Marie has in store for them with the previous monsters sort of reward that they received. And they find out that she has actually bought them tickets to a match in the arena. And this match is particularly special because it is actually happening between 2 superior masters. Of course, Figaro from the actual city, and then who's considered sort of the master of the dueling arena. And then another superior from a smaller, sort of more secluded type country. I believe it's like Huanghe is the country. And so then, of course, we have him watching this match, and the first part is a lot of talking. To me, it was a lot of bit of info dumping. We get, of course, Rei and Marie talking more about builds and about how people build their characters and what kind of stats they should focus on and such, which of course becomes really important later on when they're watching sort of this battle between the superiors. And I'm assuming will probably play into things later on. The one thing that I really liked about this part was sort of the discussion how Rei's success to date has been based really on luck. That aside from just generally being lucky, that the 2 major opponents that he's faced were actually weak to the skills that he has as a paladin and the abilities of Nemesis. And so it was kind of, I appreciated that it wasn't just setting this up that, oh, you're just so unnaturally powerful, but really most of it was just chance and happenstance, really. So that is sort of the main first part. I have to admit the first part I found, particularly the beginning of it, was a little dry. It was a little slow. As I said, there's quite a bit of sort of info dumping, just conversations, just trying to sort of get characters caught up with one another. Once we get into the actual match of the superiors, into that component of it, it's a lot more interesting, of course. It's cool to see sort of how superior embryos, what kind of capabilities they have, because we've heard a lot about them but haven't really directly seen them used. So the tail end of the first story in this was, I think, really good. Certainly it leaves on a massive cliffhanger leading us into book 4. But this volume's standouts, believe it or not, are the 2 side stories. We have these side stories. One is focusing on Rook, the other focuses on Marie. And those 2 side stories are taking place pretty much during the same time that Rei is fighting the gang, or during the time that he sort of logs off for a little bit. It's sort of, I just know that it's between the time where they leave each other and the time where they meet up again. That's basically the easiest way to say it. The first one has Rook shopping around town for a new sort of monster to tame. And the one with Marie basically has Marie wandering around town and finding herself basically going on a date with the wayward youngest princess of the kingdom, who's decided to step out and see what the city has to offer. Now, Rook's story, it is, first of all, I mean, it's cute. At its heart, it's kind of cute. It's a sweet sort of story, but a lot of it really builds up a lot of mystery about who this kid actually is. We know that, like, from reading the story, you get the idea that he's a teenager. But it sounds like there's definitely something weird going on with his life. I don't know if it's that he has some disability or his parents are something or other. It's just, it really builds a lot of mystery. We get a lot more of him discussing about stuff that he has trained himself to do in the real world. We get him discussing things about the influences that his parents have on him and so forth. And if anything, it makes the character way more interesting and a lot less of a sort of joke like, hey, I'm an underage pimp, you know, that it sort of seemed like he was going to be in volume number 1 initially. So it goes a long ways, even though it's relatively short. It goes a long way to making this character of Rook a lot more interesting. And I think one of the things that it demonstrates, and it's one of the things that I like about Infinite Dendrogram, is that even though the bulk of the story is focusing on the game and what happens in the game, because it is still just a game that players can log out of, a game that players know is a game, it still builds a lot of mysteries based on who these people are outside of the game. And there's character development about these people outside of their avatar and outside of how they play the game, which sort of creates this sort of double layer to the characters to me, because there's of course how they decide to play the game, who they are as a player. This is particularly applicable to Marie, we find out. So we know that she sort of has this idea that she plays the game a certain way, but there's a suggestion that maybe that's not who she is in real life. And her story is a bit longer, and like, I don't want to spoil any part of it, because it was probably my favorite part of the whole book, because it is a bit fun. It fleshes out probably one of the more slightly mysterious characters, and yet not really used a whole lot. I mean, like in their first major battle, all she did was basically chuck recovery items at Ray. You know, they get to the second book and she basically just bugs out and is like, give me some money, I'll do something cool with it later. And that's about it. This now, man, after this short story, like, I love this character. I want to see so much more of this character. I am looking forward to what is going to happen with this character going into the future volumes. Like, it completely obliterated, I think, my preconceived notions and expectations of just who and what this character was, which, you know, when you have volumes where it's like the side stories, I mean, I'm not going to say that they're bad, but almost always they're typically filler, right? Like, it's just like let's take one of your favorite characters and just do something cool with them for a couple pages because we didn't have enough material to fill up the book with just the main story. And yet, in this one, you really feel like these two side stories are going to become vital for what happens in Volume 4. In fact, in the afterword, the author goes so much as to say that those side stories were kind of vital information to give you because of the events that are about to occur. And B, it just makes you so much more engaged and interested in these characters other than just Ray. And with this growing cast of characters, and now reading two stories from different characters' points of view, I'm actually hoping that in some ways he finds a way to branch off other than just showing the story entirely from Ray's first person point of view. Like, I would really like to read a lot more of the adventures of just Marie doing her thing without, you know, having to play a role in front of other people, and finding out who Rook is in real life. Like, what causes a kid to have the skills and everything else that he demonstrates? You know, it really is impressive to me that we have these two short stories and they end up being probably more engaging, more interesting than even the main story. Like, half the time I feel like I finish the main story and I'm kind of like, I almost can't even be bothered because this is just going to be filler fluff. And man, I'm so glad I did not do that with this. I mean, I don't, because I can't really give an honest review unless I read all of it. But you know, there's sort of that feeling that you're kind of like, I could probably just skip this. No, you absolutely cannot skip this stuff. It is probably, like I said, the best part of the book. And again, it really does feed into what I've been talking about with Infinite Dendrogram, how the main theme of this seems to be like, you know, who do you become in a world of absolute freedom? Who do you become when the fear of death is virtually non-existent? You know, even the embryo system, it is, like I said in the first part, like I was like, okay, you know, this is really awesome. From a gamer point of view, it's awesome because the idea of having a weapon or whatever that is tailored specifically to my character, that develops exclusively and uniquely to my character, is so interesting and so engaging, and something that I would love to see in a MMO. But it seems to be more than that now. Like now, whenever I see somebody's embryo, because we know how much these embryos, the development of them is based so much on the player and their personality and their experiences and everything else. Now when I see an embryo, all I can think about is, what is going on in that person's life and in their heart and everything else that would make them have that embryo, that would make them have those abilities? Like, that to me is, it's a whole, like I said, it's like you're having multiple layers of character development and reveal all at the same time. Like, the more that we get to know Nemesis, and the more that Nemesis has abilities and everything else, and we find out, you know, what her ultimate sort of skill is and everything else, what's that going to tell us about Rey? So it's like they go back and forth, right? It's the same thing as we find out more about, like, you know, Brother Bear, Shu's, like, abilities. And there's quite a little bit about, there's some good scenes with Shu in this one too, if you like Brother Bear. But the same thing with him, like, what does his embryo say about who he is, especially now that we sort of have a bit more information about his background in real life. Same with Marie. Even Marie at one point in her story is like, what does my embryo's ability say about me? So it's kind of, it's cool to me, like, how the development, particularly of sentient embryos, like, you know, Nemesis, or even Rook's succubus, or Hugo's, I can't remember her name, his maiden type embryo, like, all of those things, like, it's just so, I don't know, I really like this world. I like how we're able to see characters develop, grow, and have elements of themselves revealed, not even just through themselves and their own actions, but through these embryos and through how they act towards this world that basically has told them they can be and do whatever they want. Yeah, there's laws, but, you know, if you're careful about which ones you break, you can get away with it. Like, yeah, I mean, to me, it's just so interesting, and to see sort of the moral gray areas that are created by not having limits. I mean, it's sort of like GTA gone crazy, right? Like GTA, obviously, you know, you have no choice but break some laws. I mean, that's kind of the game, but you certainly can pick and choose just how you're going to play. And this is even to a more of extreme. So I really like this series so far. You know, like I said, the way that the main story component ends leaves on a major cliffhanger. I expect that Volume 4 is going to be just one huge bombastic battle through the whole thing. I'm sure we're going to find out quite a bit about characters and their abilities, and I am really looking forward to it. So if you've liked Dendrogram up until now, as I said, the first part of the, you know, sort of main storyline story, found it a little bit dry, you know. Yes, it's a little bit interesting to find out how to develop characters and everything else. And I mean, it's all necessary, but it isn't until we sort of get to the arena that things really pick up and it becomes interesting. There's some new mysteries and everything else. But the two short stories are really what make this volume stand out, are a lot of fun to read, and made me really engaged in characters that up until now have just been sort of like secondary window dressing. So all in all, a really, really good volume, very strong in terms of moving characters forward, developing characters, making me more invested in a different set of characters. So if you've loved Infinite Dendrogram till now, I think you'll definitely enjoy this volume. If you haven't checked it out, if you've been really waffling, especially because you're like, oh God, it's another virtual reality MMO type thing, you know what? Give it a chance, because it really is very, very different from pretty much all the other type of sort of game-based light novels that we've had so far. So those are my thoughts on volume number 3 of Infinite Dendrogram. My next review is going to be a brand new series. It's a volume 1, and that's going to be Monster Girl Doctor. This one being put out by 7 Seas. Like, I read the first chapter, and it's probably everything that you think it's going to be. We will most definitely talk about it next time. So if you love light novels and you're brand new to the channel, you should consider subscribing. I do 2 to 3 reviews every week, as well as a weekly countdown of the top 10 best-selling light novels in Japan. Thank you so much for joining me in this video, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Till then, bye-bye for now.